This conference will now be recorded.
Yes, it is, the chamber's Wi-Fi.
Okay, afterwards, or, okay, thank you.
I want to see the pen.
Thank you.
Okay.
You ready?
I believe so, sorry about that.
Chair's going.
Oh,
Okay, I'd like to call this meeting of the Waterford Planning Commission to order, July 11th,
334.
3:34 p.m. Welcome all. I'm going to I've called it to order. Commissioner Barrett is absent. She's away and could not be at the meeting or online. And Commissioner Pro Tem or future Commissioner Lawton is sitting in at the table. She won't be able to vote today, but we welcome her for volunteering. And I really appreciate you being willing to contribute. Approval of the minutes, June 6th. Do we have approval, any items or a motion to approve?
I move to approve the minutes.
I have a comment about minutes.
Yes, Commissioner Head.
Sorry, do we have to turn these mics on? No. Okay. I really appreciate that somebody is doing minutes. I just found that there was a lack of detail about our discussion around the safety issues for granting access to the property that we approved the split on. I'm just not sure if it's possible to request that there be more detail. There was a very extensive discussion about that and the safety issues surrounding that and the Head Start. And I feel like it was sort of condensed into one very short paragraph, and I think the safety concerns of the Planning Commission weren't captured in that. Am I mistaken?
So I see here on page 3, you're speaking with number 4, public hearing A, the small IV components.
Partition.
Brett Pittman testified they are concerned about the safety of children in the neighborhood and out of traffic. So you would like to have commissioners also echo that or spoke to it, or what would you like? Would you like to add something there?
I mean, I don't think it's worth going back to the conversation and re-documenting all the concerns that were expressed. I just want to note that that there were multiple, commissioners that did express concern about the safety, and that potentially it wasn't, heard or taken seriously. I just feel like a lot of detail in that conversation is missing.
Crystal?
At some point
Please speak into the mic, Crystal.
meeting, when we're not doing later in the meeting, when we're not doing the agenda, I would like to comment on such an issue as that, because I think there are things that could be suggested maybe that wouldn't be part of they're not part of the approval because we can't emphasize that in a petition, but there are things I think we could do.
Okay, so what you're saying is what's documented
And
here?
Yeah,
is-
later, I'll put it on my agenda.
Okay.
Bring it up.
So what's here is specifically related to the partition, but not the extensive discussion. So it's a different set of minutes specifically for that judgment.
So when I was working on these minutes, I adhered more to Robert's Rule of Order, one of the key rules out of there is it is supposed to be a record of what was done, not what was discussed. However, if it is the commission's prerogative, I can add more details. I just would need the director to do so.
Okay, like Chris was saying, maybe there's a separate place because this was a hearing, maybe there's a different place for that, but I just, it is part of our public record, these minutes, and I think it's important that they have, that they be detailed enough, because it's hard enough to remember from month to month, to keep all the detail in our brains, so to speak.
Yes, it may not bear on the, well, it is, so our directive from the state, I printed it out, and I didn't bring a copy with it to me today, but also besides the motions made and the votes, the major points of discussion are also required to be in the minutes.
Okay.
So you might want to refer to that document. It's listed in our, or I'll send you a copy.
Okay.
We just don't put names by
Okay.
everybody says, right?
I don't think that's necessary.
I don't think they
I believe it says the substance of the discussion.
Okay. So just for my own edification, on then subsection 9 of that same section, instead of vote passed unanimously with no further discussion, would you prefer if it said vote passed unanimously with commissioners also noting concerns for the safety and traffic, and then go into more details about the things that were specifically discussed in that hearing? Would that be more what you had in mind?
Yeah, I think that would be
Okay.
really helpful, but I just want to make sure that it goes in the right place. Sounds like Crystal's saying that.
No, no,
Is that-
I
okay.
That's why I'm gonna talk later.
Okay.
About the minutes.
I
It's
think,
about the issue.
Okay, I see. Okay. Yes,
I
thank
think
you.
the right place for that would be, there's a number on the next page, on page 4. It says commissioners discussed if access from Washington is the best option. 2, commissioners also
Oh, okay.
expressed concern about safety of children in the area.
Okay. I will get that.
More detail, yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
No problem. Thank you for the recommendation.
Anything else on that? Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I move to approve the minutes
With the amendment.
with the amendment.
As an, yeah, that's an amendment. Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes as amended. All, Commissioner Head,
Yes.
Commissioner Lovendall,
Yes.
Commissioner Thielen is yes also. Chair comments. We have a big agenda today. Crystal would like to do a training. It's going to go on for a bit, but she said that she could split it to the next meeting if the short-term rental thing goes too long or if we need more time. So the short-term rental thing is important, very important, and hopefully we are getting down to where we need to be for that. So I'd just like to say that, and let's just move on to public comment. Public comments. Do we have anyone online who would like to make a public comment about the agenda item? If not, let's move on to the short-term rental ordinance discussion, pages 6 through 25. So I gave the document on page 23 to Mr. Milliman. He asked for it. Said he would, the interim planning director, or the interim city manager, asked for where we were with this. And so I wrote down all of the things from my notes that the planning commission had recommended. And he asked for what the city council had too, and I think there may be one or two in there that the city council recommended. And the current city manager, Mr. Huddle, went through last week and created this document based on the document that I had given him. And the only item that I saw that was not addressed was item number, if you look on page 23, number 2. Oh, excuse me, not that one. That one wasn't addressed either, the renewed piece. But the proof of use, the item 7, which we asked for, was not in there. And I actually saw him at the pancake breakfast. He said he had just overlooked it. That it was on purpose. So hopefully that'll be in the new draft. So that's really kind of where we're at. I included another document about our explaining our position, basically to the city on our recommendations regarding the cap. That's on page 22.
Mine's not paginated.
Oh,
Right before, just tell me before.
so it's just before. It's at the very end of the ordinance.
Or,
And it says, planning commission recommendations regarding the short-term rental cap.
Yeah.
And then following that is the document I submitted in April with our changes. So that's kind of where I'm at. So let's go ahead and talk about it now. Let's see where we're at. Commissioner Head.
Yeah, I just wanted to inform the commission that I did talk to Jeff McFannel. And Jeff McFannel is a local contractor, builder, and inspector, home inspector. And he said that he would be willing to do inspections. He said he would also be willing to, I informed him it wouldn't be a full home inspection, just an inspection to declare that the residence was safe to occupy as a short-term vacation rental. He said he would be willing to give input on the list, the checklist that we come up with for safety issues. He said there are things that we might not be considering. So, and I told him I would follow up as soon as I had more information.
Thank you, Commissioner Head. That's awesome.
Real quick, could you state his name again?
Jeff McVannel, MC capital VANNEL, I believe.
It's not Vanel, it's Vanner.
It's McVannel with an L at the
McVannel.
end. Yeah. He has the McVannel subdivision between off of east of Jackson between 15th and 16th.
Commissioner Lovendall.
I have something that relates to inspections. And, can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
You,
Anyway, as it relates to inspections, we state in our ordinance that we may do an inspection by the city administrator. But I did some research on 13 cities. They all require an initial inspection. And I think that even though that saying that we may, I think in fact it's very important that we have an initial inspection. Because one, we are giving them a license and we're signing off saying, yes, you're okay to go. But we haven't looked to see if you've met the requirements of our ordinance. In my mind, it doesn't have to be a building inspection with all the other, what we want them to be in compliance with is what is stated in our ordinance. And that can be done by a Jeff McFannel, or it can be done by a designee. It's done by fire chiefs. It's done by various people in these 13 cities that I researched. So I just think that our ordinance should state that we should recommend that one initial inspection be done. And some cities do it annually, some do it every 3 years, some do it every 5 years, some,
So it would be a prerequisite to getting the business license for short
Yeah,
term.
they would have to, we'd have to
Or
just
for renewing.
ascertain that they have met all the requirements. And it doesn't have to be, like I said, I sent in a paper on this. there was some comments by the city council, well, they don't want strangers coming in and inspecting. Well, they're renting to strangers to come and live in their house. So that didn't hold a whole lot of water with me. But I do think, and I wonder if we have a liability, if we don't do an inspection, we give them and they carry on without us inspecting, do they have something to fall back on? So I think it's really important that initially we inspect. And we just say, yes, you got the bedrooms, you have the parking space, you got the, the little things we outline. And I don't think it would be a big expense, and I think it's very important.
So would you, so I believe that where we were, I believe what we had voted before was that we, put the wording may, that the city may inspect. Would you like to make another motion and have us weigh in on this?
Yes.
'Cause that's what we're doing here. That's what
Right,
we're doing, is
right.
we're basically saying what we want.
Right.
Yes, I
I
agree.
would like to make a motion that before issuing the license, that they pass an initial inspection conducted by the city designee.
So we have here, so for the vacation rentals that are already in operation, that are going to be grandfathered in, maybe it would be upon renewal for them, the annual renewal, because we have here under, this section, 05.05.080 operational requirements, G, health and safety, that's on page 15. Fire and emergency safety, a completed checklist for fire safety shall be required. The licensee shall be responsible for completing the checklist. So it sounds like we're requiring these things, but it's up to the licensee to, it's the honor system basically saying that these things exist, right? These can be included in an inspection checklist.
We have a motion on the floor. So is that, I mean, I'm not a Robert's Rules of Order guy, but I
Is
think
that my motion?
you made a motion
I made a
to,
motion to
before issuing,
require an initial inspection, and for those grandfathered in, would also have an inspection.
there would be under new rules, yes.
They'd be under new rules. So,
I have it written as before initial approval or initial renewal after code change, inspection required for approval. Is that accurate and sound good to?
on-site inspection.
Okay.
Is there a second?
Second? A second?
Okay, discussion.
Okay, sorry, that was my discussion. It was a little bit premature.
So, any more discussion? Yes, I think it's a good idea to require inspection also. So, I'm gonna call the question. Commissioner Head,
Yes.
Commissioner Lovendall,
Yes.
Commissioner Thielen, yes. Thank you.
Mhm.
So these are advisories. The city council's actually, hopefully they'll listen to us. But we are the citizen input to the city, and hopefully our word carries some weight. So thank you for doing that.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Lovendall.
I can submit this paper to my findings on inspections when we go forward. When we have that discussion with the city.
Yes. The one you submitted at the last meeting, yes, I was intending to have that submitted, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else on the short-term rentals?
I was wondering if we were going to have Daniel Kearns review the final corrected document with perhaps the addition or additions from today.
I believe that he is not. I believe that John Huddle is going to. He is a lawyer, or he was a practicing lawyer, and I think the city's going to save money, and he will look it over.
Okay.
That was what I heard.
Okay. I mean, the reason Daniel Kearns, because this is exactly what he does. He helps cities develop short-term vacation rental ordinances, so I would like to put it on the record that I think we should continue to consult with him on the development of the ordinance.
Put that in the record.
Thank you.
Thank you. The other piece that, and I don't know whether we need to belabor this, but maybe I, let's see, it's the item about the renewal, in 040C, it says,
What page is that on, Greg?
it would be on page 10. On the cap on the number of short-term rental operating licenses in effect for the city of Port Orford. And they're striking out the number of 40 and just saying by resolution, which is what we had recommended. The number of short-term rental operating license that can be in effect at any one time for defined residential areas 1 and 2R. If at the time of license application for a new or renewed short-term rental license, there's not room within the applicable residence area cap. It doesn't make sense to say renewed to me. Because if you've already got your license, you're already under the cap, and you're not going to be kicked out. That's the idea of a cap.
I think, well, they would be kicked out if they didn't renew, right, annually,
If they didn't renew.
right?
Or if perhaps they get, sorry, if an inspection, turns up some things they need to fix, maybe that might be a reason why renewal might be denied, or if they don't pay a fee.
Oh, it could be renewed, it could be denied for any number of reasons, but it wouldn't be because of the cap.
Okay, that's also.
Mm.
That's my
Valid.
point. I'll bring that up with Mr. Hub,
Right.
and hopefully that'll be addressed. That was the only other piece that I saw that was, besides the inspector.
So the cap, 40 is what we decided on with the city council. I thought we went lower than that. Yeah. Okay, so it's going to be based on whatever the existing number of vacation rentals is currently.
That's our recommendation.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
The number 40 was an early draft.
Okay,
And then
yeah.
it was 33, and then it was.
Do we still not have any resolution on what the total number is?
The most up-to-date number I have is 49 total.
Is that in
Residential?
residential specifically?
I think that is total among all zones. If I'm remembering it, the residential, it's somewhere between 10 to a dozen.
Really?
But that is me going off my memory, so
Okay.
I will.
It would be great to, have that information. I mean, we've been trying to get that information since last November, before, longer. You've been trying longer, yeah, so.
Yeah.
Seems very elusive.
We've been in the process of defining what a lawful short-term rental is too.
Right, also, but who currently has a license, or who is currently operating as a short-term vacation rental? Yeah, legally.
So we have made our recommendation very clear.
Right.
That it would be the number that is existing at the time that the ordinance is adopted, as defined by the ordinance.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Lovendall.
To go back, sorry, to what Jen said about maybe having Dan Kearns just look over our ordinance. Do you think that John has the experience? There aren't any pitfalls, or this is a city council decision, so I guess.
My own personal feeling is, I believe that if John puts it, if I look at it with John, I think it'll be okay, because I know what Kearns is, I know Kearns pretty well. I mean, I know his stuff. I've read this many times.
Okay. Just punctuating.
Yeah. Anything else on short-term rentals?
I have a question.
Yes, please put the microphone, so speak in the microphone so you can be heard.
Used to this for sure. Is there going to be change of ownership tracking? How is all of this going to be tracked?
If a property is sold, the license goes away. So this is a licensing type ordinance. It's not a land use ordinance. So the county has a land use ordinance. Once it is established as a short-term rental, it couldn't be sold as a short-term rental. This is a business license, and transferring a business, you lose the license.
Okay. Thank you.
If that answers your question.
And something could get sold and we wouldn't know. Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, we would know, but it wouldn't make a difference, I guess.
Yeah, well, it would. This is a small town. I think people are going to know.
Yeah. No, sorry, I don't have anything to add.
Okay. Are we ready to move on?
Are we, the piece about, oh no, yeah, we're ready to move on.
Okay. Planning matters. We have a planning training workshop. I think we have time to do it.
Okay,
Are we going to talk about the planning clearance application?
Yes, it's number other business.
okay, so, do you have all the bells and whistles on this?
It should, it's PowerPoint.
I don't know. Yeah, there it goes.
You want to control the computer or?
No,
Okay.
I appreciate you.
Okay, I'll be with us.
I'm gonna try to control the discussion. You can say.
Okay, I'll try to be with us.
I like to do it.
Okay.
Okay, so, this planning training is quite broad. And, Wade Radomski, who is our LCDC representative for the South Coast, would like to come do planning training with you again later. And I'm all for that. I think that, you're supposed to hear these things 7 times before you understand them. And remember them. That's just the way people are. So I don't think it hurts to hear some of the same things twice. So I put this together. I have an advantage. I'm part of history because I was around when these planning rules went into effect. That was started in 1975, and a lot of things were getting acknowledged by the state into the early 80s. And I think that's when ours got acknowledged. It was a very long process. I think that Port Orford had zoning before, but through the, it's moving forward on its own, but he'll move it back. So let's, so the second thing here is an overview of the history. The statewide planning began in the 1970s, and today every city and county in Oregon has what we call acknowledged plans. You have to have those. And we have acknowledged plans. So anything that we change in our zoning ordinance or our comprehensive plan, which we'll talk about later, has to be changed by ordinance if we want to change it. And it's kind of a big deal. It's expensive. There's a lot of rules about how you do it. So when we start changing plans and things under the land use codes, it's a big deal. In fact, some things like the height restrictions, everybody in town was notified. And that would be the same if we do a bunch of code changes on housing or something like that. So the day-to-day decisions are made locally, but there's a heck of a lot of top-down stuff in the state laws that we have to include in the planning. So you guys can break in anytime you have a question. This is not formalized, just ram through this, but this is for discussion if you want to. So let's go to the next. There it is. So here's the regulatory framework. There's the Oregon Revised Statutes on the left, the Oregon Administrative Rules and Case Law, and everything is done by that. There's local comprehensive plan and zoning ordinance, which we have and use all the time here at the city. There's other approved local plans that we use, like we have sewer plans, wastewater plans, hopefully water plans, and all of these become part of our comprehensive plan if we use them and rely on them and they're adopted by the city council. Now on the right, you see this list in yellow, and there's statewide goals for all of these things. Citizen involvement is the #1 goal, and that's why I really like this planning commission. I think that you like to bring things forward, and that's why citizen involvement in Port Orford seems to be a going thing. The cities who let their planning commissions drop, because they're a lot of work sometimes in little towns to keep them up, or zoning codes can be made very administrative so that nothing comes to the planning commission anymore. You kind of lose your citizen input on things unless you're really careful. So the second one is land use planning. That's a statewide goal, #2, and land use planning is about how all these things fit together. And there's a bunch of rules for how that's done. So the one we usually work under is the zoning code, but the comprehensive plan is actually higher level than the zoning code. And we'll look at that later. Okay, then we have agricultural lands and forest lands. Those are mostly out in the county. Natural resources, we have those in the cities as well as the counties. Maybe not as many in the cities, but we do. Air, water, and land quality. Natural hazards. We have maps for natural hazards, and we have people that have to do natural hazards plans, have geologists do them before they can build. Recreational needs, economic development, housing, all these things have to be balanced. There's #10, housing. There's money at the state right now where we could update our code if we have the ability to get it together, to get it up there by the end of the month with our, how much it's going to cost. And I know we could get it, but we have to do our work first. Public facilities, we're supposed to have plans for those. We do have plans. Transportation, energy conservation, urbanization. That's another one where we could use a little work, because on our urban growth boundary is huge, but our agreement with the county is not good. It's not specific, and so consequently there's no real input from the city into the urban growth boundary. And to fix that doesn't mean we can demand a lot of things from the county, nor does the city want to take over that whole urban growth boundary, which you could, but you don't really have the capacity to do it. If the county's doing it, let them do it. But you could ask for specific things, or you could ask for notice further ahead, so that you're not scrambling in the last 3 days, like when you find out, and then say, oh, we got to get this dealt with. And so I think it should be more specific, and that's something we could put in for this grant with the state right now, I think, if we wanted to do that as part of our action. But it would be to just talk about it with the county and see what we could do.
Excuse me, I have a question. So the grant is for us to update our city code? Or
Yes,
the
we have a lot of the city code. We have a lot of, our comprehensive plan is more up to date than our city code. Okay. But our city code has a lot of things where statutes, state statutes, have redefined things, like RV use. They've redefined family. Ours says family has to be by blood. We couldn't even enforce that. That's not how today's society works. There's a whole bunch of other things in there that are just out of date. And we worked on the code in 2022. We had it ready to go to the public hearings, and then it stopped. I think they wanted to work on the STR ordinance or something, or Jessica did. And so we didn't get back to it. So now we would have to kind of start over, although we have a good basis.
Are we talking also about making the code match up more with statewide planning goals, ensuring that statewide planning goals for land use, for example, and natural resources are being
Well, we have pretty good things on that. I mean, if we're building on a wetland, or if there's a wetland on the property, we have to define it. We have to send a notice to Department of State Lands saying that somebody's going to build there, and then they comment and say whether it can be done or what the distances are and things like that. We have riparian areas, shoreland areas that we have people put them on maps and they can't build in those. So a lot of this is taken care of, but we just aren't up to date with a lot of the state laws, like especially about housing. They've been doing a ton of those, not a ton, but a lot over the last few years. And a lot of them don't apply to us because they don't apply, we don't have to do them for cities of under 10,000. But we thought we wanted to do ADUs and things like that. And if we want to do those things, there's money to do them right now. And they would like us to do them. It's not like they're not wanting us to do things. It's more like they're not making us do them if we're such a small city.
So it's basically we have to put a proposal together by the end of the month.
Yeah, I'm putting the proposal together, but I think the question will be whether we're going to need things from the city staff, and you have new staff, or no staff in some things, like we don't have a finance director. And so, there'll be things like how much match can we put in, how much money do we want to ask for some of these things. I can task out my time, but I can't necessarily task out how much it's going to cost for a mailing list to everybody in town. That would be something Joseph would probably follow up with if the city manager wanted him to do that. He give you the thumbs up. I think he's going to do it, but there's a bunch more. A lot of it is financial and city manager stuff.
Okay, thank you.
Excuse me. So, energy conservation, number 13, urbanization 14. Then Willamette Greenway, that's not ours. We don't have to worry about that. Estuarine resources, we don't have to worry about too much, but they do call the shorelands an estuarine resource. And we have rules about that, and we have how you define it and stuff like that. So the plans all work together. We have coastal shorelands in our code. We have never had an application in the coastal shorelands, but we've had partitioning in the coastal shorelands. And partitioning defines where you can build on that lot, and it would go into the plat. So the plat lasts forever. That's the theory. And then beaches and dunes and ocean resources. So we can go on to the next one unless you had some more questions about that. The state was pretty thorough in making us do those plans. That's why they took so long. People had to find a lot of information, and we didn't have the internet in those days. But more recently, we have a lot of information put out by state agencies that help us keep up with some of this stuff. So, we can go now and find what the housing requirements are for the state. We can find things about what the populations are and things that in those former days were hard to find. It was all by mail, Okay, so the Planning Commission does a couple things that are on here. Long-range planning. So that's why if we would change the code or something, you would be involved in that. You would have the main role, really, of recommending to the council what you want to see happen. The second one is implement existing plans, and that's what you do every time you come to a planning commission meeting. There's a code and you're implementing it, and that is one of the reasons why I didn't tack on to that safety issue that the person was discussing here about that property last month. Because a partitioning is different than a land use. So a person has a right to do their partitioning unless there's some safety issue with the road or something like that where you're gonna get access. But it would be the use that is causing that safety issue once the use goes in. And maybe I would suggest when something like that happens, it wasn't that I said you shouldn't be concerned about it. It was, I didn't think it could affect the partitioning as a, I don't know if I should say legally, but you know, I don't think we have a right to stop a partitioning because somebody might put a use on there that would have a safety issue. I think that you guys could, though, say something to the person who testifies, like, we can't attach this to a partitioning, but as soon as that activity starts on that lot with what they're going to do on there, you need to go ask the city if you can get some cones or something, or if the people who are doing the building permit get some cones, or even put it in Joseph's head that when he does the planning clearance, you know, you could maybe do some safety things on that road that don't have to do with partitioning. They're more of what's happening in a neighborhood. So those would be my thoughts, and that's what I was going to share with you. It wasn't that we didn't think it was important. It's maybe fits in a different place.
I'd like to chime in here. So after that meeting that we had where the concerns were raised, Crystal actually called me and said it might be a good idea to reach out to the gentleman, Mr. Pittman, and let him know that he is that we're listening. So I actually did. I went and talked to him. I gave him my phone number and I gave him the city phone number, and I told Joseph that he may be calling him if there are issues. I said, if there are issues, we want to know about it. So that would fall under the use category, as I understand it.
And the activity that's happening.
Yeah, and it's not just the construction of the place, but you know, the increased traffic,
Right.
and because that's been basically a dead end street forever.
Right.
You know,
And they might want to, the city might want to put signs there, or,
Right.
you know, there's just different things that can be done, although the use will be an outright permitted use. So that's why I think the neighbor guy that's concerned about it is very important. You know, even though maybe he didn't think he was important when he left, he is important because he's a link to what happens in that neighborhood, right? I hope that helps, you know.
Yeah, that does help. Thank you.
Okay, so others at the city, so the staff works with the public to provide information, and the city council has the final say on some of the land use activities. So we can go on to the next one. So long-range planning is stuff like comprehensive plans, statewide planning goals, zoning and subdivision ordinances and rules, and, you know, when you're doing overreaching things that apply to a lot of people. Then statewide planning goals, federal regulations like clean air and clean water are long-range planning. You can go on. So what is the planning commission's role?
Chris, I have a question. Can I
Yeah.
interrupt real quick? So for example, the visioning document that was drafted in 2006, that was a culmination of, you know, collaboration between the
Right.
mayor and the planner, city planner, and the city council, the planning commission, prominent community members. How does that fit into, I mean, none of that
That
is,
is actually that became, if they adopted it, and I think they did,
fairly certain.
at least it had a lot of input, and it's got a place in your comprehensive plan, because it feeds right into the comprehensive plan of what you want to have happen down there.
Right. And if we feel like that is not being adhered to,
Then you can bring it up.
okay,
And especially on the planning commission, you could bring it up and say, you know, I feel like we're not implementing this. You have, though, I think the building heights
Right.
changes, implemented some of
I
that.
think we've made incremental progress.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Are there things you think aren't
Well,
being?
I think there's development happening that is not consistent with that vision for the 10MU.
I bet I know one that
Right.
you're talking about, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it might not be specific enough. We might have to put something more in the code.
Mm-hmm.
I think that if it's the building I'm thinking about,
Mm-hmm.
that we did follow the code and everything. I'm not aware that we
No, I think that,
missed something, but
yeah,
yeah.
right. I think there were some gray areas in how it was launched, the project, but I think, it does adhere to the code of the 10MU in terms of setbacks and building height, but not consistent with the vision for that part of town.
You
So,
can always propose, you could look at that Battle Rock MU zone and see if it really says what you want it to say, and if not, and we're doing code changes, that's the time to put it in.
and I did have the comprehensive plan looked over externally and was told that it lacks a lot of detail and it doesn't.
Well, we have a whole, there's a whole bunch more, but yeah, it does, the comprehensive plan is not a detailed, it's just a list, it's a bullet pointed vision.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
thank you. Okay, so also you propose revisions to plans and ordinances, like we're talking about, if you felt something was needed. The council doesn't always want you to do all these things, but certainly you can bring these things up and, flush it out. See if it's important. So the planning commission oversees discretionary permits. You haven't had any of these lately. You've had only the land divisions, the partitioning. But you will be having a conditional use permit soon, I believe, if they file. And,
Speak to the microphone.
Sorry about that. I believe it's actually 2 conditional uses that'll be coming in soon that you'll be able to look over. So we're gonna get some experience soon.
we do have a site plan review in that Battle Rock zone, and you could actually do a code change that would have more site plan review in the Battle Rock zone than, we only have it for really large structures. And if you felt that was important, that would be something where then it would have to come to the planning commission, and you could check, you could even add some stuff. There's 6 things that people have to put, 3 of 6 or 6 of 12 or something on their buildings to try to give it some character.
I remember that.
And you could even say what things you don't want.
Right. Is that something that we would put in the proposal for the state to sort of
Well, that's not what
evaluate?
they're funding this year, but but they're not gonna look at everything and say, you shouldn't put that in because you're not funding it. So I'm not gonna use it to sell what we're doing, but it is something that if we're doing stuff, this is the time to do it at the same time, because you can slip it in there and it doesn't have to be a big deal.
Okay.
I don't mean slip it in so nobody knows. Slip it
Very
in so it
transparent
doesn't
about
have,
adding it.
yeah, so it doesn't have to take a whole
Right.
notice to the city or something.
Right.
I have a question. On a conditional use permit, someone gets a conditional use permit for building or something, but they never do anything about it. Years go by.
Yeah, there's a certain amount of time on it. There's a time limit. I don't remember what it is, but they can't just go and 20 years later say, I'm gonna do this. We'd have to look at the code. It's section 1732. I think there's a time limit, but I'm not sure. Okay, follow the rules for public meetings. Greg does that every time. Be informed, and I do think you guys are all trying to be informed right now. And then I think the most important thing is the last, and that's to treat everybody with respect. And I appreciated that Greg did reach out to that guy, because, you know, if you come and you don't understand how Oregon planning is, and nobody pays attention to what you say, you might think that they're just not hearing you. And that's not always true. You don't want it to be true. Okay, go on. Okay, types of land use decisions. So the ones you have done so far are called, well, there's legislative, and that's the policies and ordinances, and we haven't done a change on that since height restrictions. But if we do a bunch of code stuff, that would be legislative. Legislative means broad, applies to everybody. It's not specific to a piece of property. So code changes are definitely legislative. So I think that's probably all we have to say about that right now. We can move on to the next one. So what you guys have been doing are quasi-judicial changes. In other words, they're kind of like legalistic. You can't talk to people that are involved. You can't do this, you can't do that. But you make rules based on what the rules are in the code, and we go by those rules.
I have a question. I know I did see a slide in here about ex parte communication, but doesn't that only apply when one is serving on a quasi-judicial body?
I believe so, yeah, because when you're doing a legislative change, you can talk to anyone about it, right? Yeah.
And also just in general, you know, we want to be able to have opinions about anything. Right. So it's really when you're serving as a quasi-judicial body that you can't engage in ex parte
Right,
communication.
that's where it's like a law thing. Because if you're on a jury, you're not supposed to be talking except when you're on that jury.
Right.
Yeah. And you are kind of like a jury on the planning commission. Yeah. So if we did a zone change that applied only to one property or something like that, that wouldn't be legislative, that would be quasi-judicial. So the state gives us all those rules about who can speak when, and the stuff that Greg reads at the beginning of the meeting. And, you know, they get tiresome, but I think it's good to go through them because the public doesn't know what's happening otherwise. And you're not supposed to show bias or conflict of interest. You can show bias. It's okay if you say that you think you're biased, and you'll do your best. But I mean, we all have biases. But a conflict of interest gets more into money matters, and so you definitely have to pull yourself out, or yeah. So we'll get to that later. So staff can have all kinds of contact. Joseph and I can talk to anybody about anything during a quasi-judicial. It's our job to keep the public informed, and it's okay if we hear what they have to say. And we just have a different role. Okay, so the staff role, here it is. Administrative. We provide information to the public. We provide information to the applicant. We provide notices to the newspapers and the public. We follow up with state and county agencies or other organizations that may have concerns or information. We provide information to all parties. We send out decisions. We follow the rules and sign zoning clearance letters to allow building permits, grading permits, etc. So anytime that planning is screwed up, it's a trial to fix it. Okay, moving on. citizens' rights. Every citizen has the opportunity to be heard, as long as they're respectful and civil. They're supposed to have the opportunity to present and rebut evidence. In other words, they don't have to agree with what the applicants say. They don't have to agree with what the staff says. They don't have to agree with what you say. But you guys have the right to incorporate citizen concerns in most cases. Sometimes it's how or where you do it, because I would say that you thought we didn't give you that right, probably on a land petition. But I think you do have some rights, even on a land petition, just to kind of amplify those things and tell people how they can be involved. People have a right to findings of fact. And that's why I'm always saying to the Planning Commission, say what you're basing your decision on. So if you make a motion and you have an application in front of you, it's good to say, based on the staff findings, or you could say, based on the staff findings, except I don't agree with such and such finding on page 19. And then we all go look at it, and you tell us why you don't agree. And you can even make a motion and say, I make a motion that we change this finding. That's exactly what you're here for. I mean, we try to do it right, but you know, we don't have all the information either, because you have the public out there talking to you, and you may agree with some things that they say. Sometimes they may know something staff didn't even know, or have a different take on it, and you may think they're right. Then that's your right to incorporate those findings. So that's why I always say to you, do the findings, and I especially say it to you when there's nobody here, because I want you to learn how to do it, so that when you have a room full of people, you could do that yourself almost without looking, you know, to me or Greg like, well, what do I do? Or even Joseph. You know, just so that you kind of own it. And I think it's good. So we'll move on. So the basis of a decision is based on the criteria in the comprehensive plan, the zoning ordinance, the subdivision ordinance, state laws, or even like our Battle Rock special plan that we have. You apply the criteria in the code to the facts that are presented, and the result become findings of facts. Findings of fact. So every finding of fact that Joseph puts in his reports, they usually are based on something in the code or city codes or city things that are going on that have to be addressed. So how do you do a finding of fact? So here's an example criteria. So the code is kind of loose here. It says, to allow the use, there shall be assurance that the property is not subject to landslides. Well, then an example finding would be, the property is not subject to landslides because Oregon registered engineer E-Geological has entered a statement that he has tested subject property and that he has determined that there is no potential for landslides due to the topography of the site. I mean, that's just kind of a simple.
I have a question. So if, say this finding is incorrect, who is responsible if something goes awry?
You mean this finding?
Well,
This
if specific finding,
a
for
geological
example.
report, that's why it's required to have certain things in it, and it's required to be by an Oregon registered engineer. And our hazards area, we have a section in the code that addresses hazards. And it's very specific. It says if they can certify that there are no potential for landslides or hazard issues, they certify it and they're done.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens, they go on and say, but if this happens, then they can do this and this. And I don't accept those because I say, if you're saying it might happen, then you haven't really certified that.
Right.
But they don't want to certify it.
Right.
And then we also have another situation where there'll be a hazard study, and the owner will keep shopping until they find somebody who says is
willing to stay.
certification.
Yeah.
The only good thing about that is, I mean, they can't do that when they've already presented it as part of their application. But on some permitted uses they don't have to come to the planning commission. They do that with the staff, and I think now that we should just take the first one and make them. I mean, I don't see how they can shop like that, and finally they find somebody agreed to say it, and then we have to accept that.
Right.
But it's also very tricky in today's climate where you have people writing emails constantly and sending things back and forth, and so you don't hardly ever know when it's final, because they'll send you one and say, "Is this what you want?" And then you say, "Well, no, not that won't do it." And then they send another one, and so I don't know what the answer is.
Yeah.
And I'm not a geologist. Joseph's not a geologist. The other option that we have is to hire a geologist to look at what the geologist has
Right.
done,
To assess the
which is
validity.
very expensive for
Right.
us, or to make them hire another geologist.
Right. If there's any question.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't always feel great about that whole thing,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know what to do about it. I don't know what other jurisdictions really do.
It would be good to know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for answering that. I appreciate
And
it.
we really don't have, our own engineers and stuff, they don't have geologists here.
Right. We don't have anybody with the expertise to vet and a report.
The only one that I know, well, no, I shouldn't say that, 'cause a lot of them claim they do it, but they really don't have geologists on board. That's a specialty.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, moving on. So, findings, identify the standards and criteria, and that's what we try to do in the staff reports. Weigh the criteria with the facts to make the findings. If some criteria aren't applicable, well, then we say so. Maybe we already got something in that kind of said what it's supposed to say, and if something conflicts in our ordinance, it's okay, we say that. That's a finding. And then we say why we're choosing the one that we do. And you guys can do that too. You tell what you believe to be the facts and why, and that would be something you guys could do. If you hear something and you think it's a fact and it's not what we brought up, you have the right to speak up and say, and we're not going to be mad. That's your job. I don't agree with this. And then we're supposed to help you figure out how you do want to state it. That's why you're on these boards. So findings for big projects or contested activities can be organized by the staff and brought to the next meeting. Yeah, that needs to happen, especially if there's a lot of changes to what's in the staff report and there's things happening and you guys make a lot of proposals for findings. Then if we had to change them, we could bring them back to you. Okay, move on. So the public hearing, so the chair tells the audience how it will be conducted, how the decisions will be made, what's relevant testimony, which is supposed to be, something from the code. If you had a room full, Greg, you could take a poll to see how many people wanted to talk. You could also take a poll to see if how many are for and how many are against, or if they're just asking questions, and then kind of how to organize the meeting on the spot. Okay, move on. Public hearing, you've heard this many times. And Greg can also adjust this a little bit in a public hearing, because maybe as you look down that bullet list, you have the applicant's testimony. You always have that first. And that's the proponent. And then you have the opponent or the neutral, but maybe people just want to ask questions and they don't want to be put into those boxes. And if there's not very many people involved, you don't have to use the boxes. They can say, well, I just want to talk. That's okay. So, okay, we can move on. So here's ex parte contact. This is what you were talking about earlier. When you're doing something on somebody's property, the reason you're not supposed to talk to people about it is because any discussion that you as decision makers have about that property should be for the public, just like we invite them to come and testify. So don't let them talk to you about something, because then you have to record it and invite them to the meeting to share. So we talked about this a little bit before. We all have biases. You can just kind of, when the chance comes, share your share your inclination or your judgment. Just say, if you think you can, that you'll try to make a fair decision. But a conflict of interest is if you are making some money by this, or somebody in your family, you probably don't want to participate. Or if you're losing money by it, it's just, that's a different matter. And we do have a time, that's on your statement, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we have a time when you bring those things up. So some of our code is not clear and objective, and that's pretty often the case in most cities. Our code is not bad. It's just a little outdated, but it works if we use it. Sometimes people have, but so you're supposed to make it as clear and objective as possible, so that people know exactly what. And that's what I'm saying about if we wanted to do an urban management agreement with the county. Make it as clear as we can of exactly what it is that we want. Do we want them to use our road standards? Do we want them to make bigger lots instead of smaller lots so they can be divided if they come into the city? Do we just want to get it 35 days ahead of time so that we can organize to talk? Those are all the things that could be done. Okay, move on. I think we're getting close to the end.
Yeah.
Was that the end?
No, we haven't.
You guys have been so good and writing down things, and I hope it's helpful. There's a lot more than this, but it gives you an idea of where these things stand. And you also have in your packet the comprehensive plan.
Mm-hmm.
These are just the goals and policies, and a few of the recent things that we've done. But certainly the plan can be changed also. And it should be. As you can see, we've had many times it's been changed on the first page, or the second page.
Mm-hmm.
So that amendment in 2019 was because we did tsunami rule, new tsunami stuff.
I have a question, Crystal. How, are we 100% sure that we're gonna get that grant submitted by the end of the month?
No?
No, okay,
Well, I mean, I'm gonna get my part done,
right.
but I don't know. I can't tell the city administrator what to do, and I don't know if he's got other things to do. And I will call him.
Mm-hmm.
I've sent an email, but we talked about it a couple of times, and I think he's for it.
Mm-hmm.
But it kind of it's going to take some time because we don't have a finance director.
Right.
And so that's why I'm hesitating, because I don't know if he's gonna step into that, or if I think Dave, who used to do it, could just do it.
Johnson, yeah, is it an annual grant?
No,
No.
this one's for 2 years, and this is the first opportunity we've had to get state money for quite a while.
Is there any way that we could, convey
I think we
the
should say,
importance?
I think we should say that we are all for,
Yeah,
doing code updates and getting the grant as soon as we
Yeah.
can.
I mean, yeah, would we be able to address things like setbacks and parking in the 10NU and?
Well, yeah, possibly. I mean, a lot of it has to do with the housing stuff. That's what the state wants to hear right now.
I see.
If parking's an issue, I guess you could start organizing your thoughts of what the problem is or something, so that we could maybe get through it.
It sounds like a motion would be in order for someone to move that we recommend to the city administrator that we apply for the grant, for the state grant for planning for code updates.
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we recommend to the city administrator that we apply for the grant to make code update. And,
I'll second it.
I recommend to the city administrator we apply.
for the grant to make code updates. That the city work with Crystal Sodi to get the grant in before the deadline.
By the end of the month.
Yeah, it's
By,
the 31st, July 31st.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like,
It's been moved and seconded. We have discussion now. We're discussing this.
Okay.
So
Should we tell Joseph?
I will. I have the
Okay.
right here. So we have a motion and a second to recommend to the city administrator that we apply, I guess the city apply. The city applied for a grant to make code updates by July 31st.
we better say earlier than that, because there's always
Oh,
transmittal and stuff like that we have to worry about. We better say, I think that's a Monday.
I have a motion to recommend to the city administrator that the city apply for grant to update or to make code updates before July 31st.
Let's say by the end of
July.
or July 28th or something like that. What is the 20th?
No, I think it is a Monday, you're right, the 31st. So maybe Friday the
do it
20th.
Thursday or something.
Thursday the
So we
27th.
can actually
Yeah,
27th?
Thursday the 27th.
That's amended to the 27th,
Yeah, amended to the 27th.
July 27th.
Thursday, July 27th.
Crystal, how much are we allowed to apply for? Is there a limit?
Well, is this time to talk?
Yes, we're having discussion on the motion now.
The housing grants are very specific, and they'll probably be very big for bigger cities, because they have all this stuff they're required to do by state law. But we are exempted, and so I've talked to the state staff. They know what we're doing. They saw it last year. They want us to get it in. They want to help us with it. They helped us last year. They looked through it. They said whether we were addressing things properly, because I always like to have another pair of eyes on it that knows planning too. And, they're really urging us to get this done. They wanted to help us, but we're in a special category. And I forget what that's called, but it's kind of like the leavings of the, in other words, we're not gonna get a $40,000 grant or something, but some other big city.
Whatever's
might.
left over.
Well, but I was thinking that we would be probably in the range of 13 to 20. And that's probably about all we could handle because we don't have the capacity to do those big grants.
It's really just for staff time, isn't it?
Yeah, a lot of these grants, they'll pay for the consultant's time. And then, so that would be me. I would be doing it as a consultant. They'll pay for some of the hard costs, like the Measure 56 notice to the whole town. They likely would use like Joseph's time, which he would put in a lot, because he would not only be doing that Measure 56 notice and all those envelopes and everything to everybody in town, delivering them to the post office, everything you do for a bulk mailing. And he and I would be working on the notice together that goes out. He'd be putting a lot of time into it. I think most of that would be matched. Could be matched. That's how the city usually did it. There are people that were on staff were used for match. Not that they're free, but that gave us some match.
So it's an in-kind match, not an actual monetary match?
They used to have, on most of them, they have like a 20% match or something, but this year they don't, but they just want to see some match. So it just shows that we're committed.
We have a motion, we've discussed it. Is there anything else? I'd like to go ahead and move
So
forward.
just for clarity, Crystal, this is a housing grant through the Department of Housing? State
No, it's through the Department of Land Conservation and Development. And it's for code changes.
Oh, okay.
Code changes to address housing. But there's no law that we can't put something else in there, but we can't spend a lot of time on something else. Like parking might be a huge issue. I mean, we've already dealt with it here in the Planning Commission several times, and the council hasn't approved it.
Right. So it would be really to alleviate to create long-term housing for.
And
ADUs
ADUs possibly, if you want that, and if the council wants it, and also to update our definitions and things, and to make options for maybe cottage housing that's smaller, and ways that could be
Tiny
incorporated into. Yeah, probably not so tiny, but like 900 square feet or something that would, could be part of a proposal that somebody would bring in.
Okay. Does this come in the form of an application, or is it?
It's an online application, and you fill in everything. And then I have to do a detailed summary of every task and what it's worth.
And then that would be approved by the city council?
Yes, they would have to approve it, and then there's other parts to it that city staff would be doing. Joseph would be trying to figure out his time, working with the city manager. The city manager and any finance information he has, they would decide what that time is worth for the match.
So would you have to have a finalized application before the city council meeting? I think it's on the 18th, right?
I don't know that they're gonna require to see the whole application, but those are things I need to know.
You can ask for permission perhaps to.
Well, I think I would explain it on a summary of this is what we're doing, and then they would have to write a letter saying that they approved.
I think the details of how it's gonna work out are beyond.
Well, I just want to acknowledge that if she needs the city council approval, that the meeting's on the 18th and our deadline is the 27th.
Yeah, that's why I'm
Right.
worried. That's why I'm saying things like, well, I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, what we can do is we can tell Mr. Huddle that this is what we want to do. I think that's really what we can do.
That's the best.
So we have a motion on the floor. It's been motion, Made and seconded. Commissioner Head,
Yes.
Commissioner Lovendall,
Yes.
Commissioner Thielen is a yes. And so the motion passes Thank you.
4:52.
at 4:52. Thank you.
Real quick question from the recorder, though. Which commissioner put forth the motion and which commissioner seconded?
I put forth the motion.
Commissioner Head puts forth the motion. Commissioner Lovendall seconded it.
Thank you.
Okay, are we, so I just before we go to the comprehensive plan piece, I wanted to just do a time check.
We don't have to do that comprehensive plan.
So I'd like to put a couple items ahead of that. If we get to that, great. But I think that and I'd like to move the item D on other business up to the next slot, because I think it's something that's important. So under other business, so let's put off the comprehensive plan review for the moment anyway, and let's take up other business number 7. And I'd like to start with item D, review of approval process for the planning clearance and building permits for commercially zoned properties. That's pages 65 through 71 in our packet. And if we have time, we'll go back to the other.
I think it's the last page.
It's page
72?
72.
Well,
Did, Joseph, do you want to lead us off on this, or?
this is a planning clearance form that Crystal and I have gone through and updated. It now is up to what our code currently says. This item was on the agenda because one of the commissioners requested it sort of offhandedly at the last meeting, and it was brought up again a little bit today. It was mostly here for me to hear the commissioner's thoughts.
Okay.
And I included the up-to-date application, so you can, have something to refer to as we discuss, what sort of things we would like to change about the review process for the commercially zoned, although, now it sounds like it might be 10 MU zoning instead of commercially zoned.
I would think that the 10 MU, since it's a mixed use
Yeah,
of commercial and
residential.
4C, I think that would be included.
Yeah, I think so too. Mm-hmm.
Okay,
So that would be something to add to your list.
Okay.
So do commissioners have other comments on this? Commissioner Lovendall?
What do you mean, what do you mean, 10 MU would be included?
What I mean is that since 10 MU is a mixed use zone where commercial uses are approved, that we should be also discussing.
Yeah, but it's not in this,
yeah, I thought it was just for commercial properties,
Yeah.
so I have.
because every zone is different, even though it's.
I understand. Yes, I'm not saying, I'm just saying that's maybe next time.
Yeah.
Okay,
We look at one that
With
includes
10
10.
MU.
Thank you for the clarification, because that really wasn't clear. That's what I meant, but I didn't really say it. We're not gonna add 10 MU to the name of this, I don't understand. Commissioner Lovendall.
I had a concern about, we had a discussion at one point in time that we would ask that the applicant bring back the sign, that we, the city, would check off and note that they have clicked, that they were approved by the county, and there had been no changes from, like, they didn't put in for residential and get it changed to commercial, and we don't know anything about it. That sort of thing to go on. So if we could, there was some discussion that we would know that they got approval before they started building. We don't have a process for that.
Yeah, I'm interested in that also. Was that something is that in our code somewhere, or is that something that we requested? Could you refresh my memory? Or is that, did we just request that?
We just.
I remember we talked about it,
Yeah,
we
did.
talked about it,
We
but
did talk about it. Some people felt like, well, there's no enforcement of it, but I think it would be proper for someone to present their approval to the city so that we can have, they actually got approval.
I
And there weren't
understand,
changes.
sorry, was that the city, and I was gone for a portion of last year because of my father, but at the city council, there was a building project where it started out as residential, but it clearly wasn't, and then it
That
became
was in the
commercial.
10MU.
Yeah, and it went to the county, and then it changed to, it started here as residential, changed to commercial at the county, but didn't have to come back to the city for approval. So my understanding was that the city council did address that loophole in the ordinance, but I'm not sure where
They
it
did.
ended up in the ordinance, yeah.
There was
They haven't
discussion.
changed the ordinance.
Really?
And they didn't, but they, maybe it's just a discussion.
Well, you would have to change. You would have to change a planning ordinance, and there's been no change in a planning ordinance unless they're talking about some other ordinance that they have.
Could you not include that requirement on your plan clearance form? Why couldn't you?
I mean, I don't think you'd have to have it in an ordinance. It's
Right,
just-
that's what I'm
yeah.
saying. You wouldn't have to do it in an ordinance. We could just put it on our planning clearance form as a
It's on
check
there,
off.
didn't somebody say that? It's not on there now.
it's not, I didn't see it.
No, it's not on there now.
I think it could be put on there, please.
So, who has the authority to do that? I guess that's what I'm wondering, does the city manager have the ability to do that as a part of the process?
Yeah, I think. I mean, this is a tool, not, and as long as it doesn't conflict with the codes, there's nothing wrong with changing a tool. I mean, an application is a tool, so we could do a new application and then ask somebody.
So we could require them to bring the permit back to the city before construction can,
Commences.
commence?
Wait, before. I don't know how they, I don't know
Speaking
if
of
they
which-
could. I
Don't they
don't,
have to have the permit approved before they start, they break
Yeah.
ground? So
Yeah.
they could bring it to us before they break ground,
they could bring it to us when they get it.
when we get it.
Or there could be a final process here that says, approved by the county as submitted or as approved by the city or what other option to indicate that the plans changed completely from the time that the city approved the application to, the time that they're gonna start building. Because how else would we know?
I think it's a really good idea, and I wonder if there would have to be something, if there would have to be penalties or, I mean, would there have to be teeth? Otherwise, would it just be ignored? And how would that?
Or, yeah, I'm not sure about how the building process starts, but, I mean, can you make the commencement of the building process contingent upon that information coming back from the county? The building can't start until the city gets back the plans from the county so that the city can evaluate whether they've changed substantially or whether they are still as they were submitted.
Can we just request that the county send us a copy of the final?
I think
We could request,
we could
but
request, but we'd have less teeth probably in that request.
that's what I'm wondering is where is the jurisdictional requirement to do something like this? Crystal?
There's other things we don't know, and I have never known, and those are whether the building codes names for commercial and residential are the same as ours, or whether those words they use are part of the assessor's office, because there are different words that mean two different things, two different jurisdictions. An assessor's office has commercial on land, but it's somewhat related to our zoning, but it's not the same thing. And you can't use an assessor's office C that means commercial, which a lot of cities do that by mistake, especially small cities, because they think they can use the assessor's office C. And the C has to do with the value that the assessor's office puts on it rather than the zoning. So it's very complicated, and that's the only reason that I sometimes question this, because it's like, are we going to find things that really aren't really going to tell us things anyway because they have a different code system? And I'm not saying that they're not supposed to do what we say. I'm saying that they may not call it the same thing.
Well, I mean, there's global terms, you know, like residential and commercial here, for example, and I mean, that's a pretty basic, right? I mean,
The
aren't those
assessor's office calls
aren't-
different things. They put those R's and C's.
Okay.
Different things that
well?
don't
But
have to.
on the building permit, on their application that goes in from us, everything, it's marked off what they're considering it residential. And part of also what we want is to know that it actually got approved. Yeah, for a crowd.
Or maybe there could be some standardization on our part to be more aligned with, we can't change,
Well, I mean, we do planning stuff and they do something.
right,
I don't know I'm not saying it's true. I'm just
right.
saying
It just,
Could be, but I mean, that's part of, we could always, if there was this, oh, well, you know, it looks like it's commercial, we could always make a call. But that's just part of why this is important on here, because we really do want to know that they actually did get approval.
Because I do know that something said commercial that wasn't commercial, what we approved, but what I don't know, and it's like, we would say, well, why don't you just call the building inspector? Because they don't even talk the same language. You know, and you would have to sit down and see a whole bunch of it, and they don't want to mess with us. They're doing their own thing. I mean, that's,
I think,
But I think that's more of a that situation probably is more of a rarity and probably, it doesn't happen all the time. It happens maybe with a particular entity or something, but also the fact that we do want to know that they submitted their plans were approved, and we need to have them come back and show us, and that should be simple.
I think you've hit the nail on the head right there, Commissioner Lovendall. We're not gonna solve, we are citizens, we're not gonna solve this. But what we can say is we want the permit to come back. We want the thing that we sign off on, we want it to be the same when it comes back. And we want, so that there's not some sleight of hand
agreed.
go on. So, I'm willing to bring this to Mr. Huddle if he'll talk, but if I get his opinion and maybe he has some suggestions, being a lawyer, being around this stuff for a long time, maybe he has a way and understands the teeth or the authority or how it would be worded. But I would entertain a motion that would put us on record that that's what we would like to have in simple language, rather than getting into all the details of commercial or assessors, and just say that. And you said it, just what you just said. I thought it would be a really good motion.
I move that we recommend to change the planning clearance application by adding that a requirement that the applicant bring back the approved permit from the county for review by the city. Does that work?
Yes, it would. you want to say the reason, or just that it
Oh, do we
be
need to
done?
put it, oh, okay. So that we know that the applicant has in fact received a clearance from the county. And that it is the same. We don't want, maybe you don't want to add that, just that we received clearance from the county. Or approval.
Okay, can we second and then discuss, maybe we can amend it?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, I second the motion.
Okay, now we can,
And I think what you said earlier was to ensure that what's being built is what the city approved,
yes.
that it's the same, like you said that.
So can you rephrase, would you like to rephrase the whole thing, or would you?
What does he have?
Can you say what we have?
Motions to recommend to change the planning clearance application by adding applicant must bring back signed permit, so that we know clearance is for the same work.
Sorry, can you say that last part so we know that?
The clearance is for the same work,
Okay.
to ensure the work is the same. I believe is what Commissioner.
To ensure that, that the plans are the same as what the city initially approved.
Yes.
Okay.
So would you amend that, Commissioner Lovendahl, to
Yeah.
amend your motion to that?
Yes, I amend my motion to what was stated.
Okay. And then,
Second.
okay. It's been moved and seconded. Can we have a reading of that, please? Let me get it.
Motions to recommend to change the planning clearance application by adding applicant must bring back signed permit so that we know to ensure that the plans are the same as the initial approval.
Initial plans approved by the city.
Initial
Plans approved by the city.
plans approved by the city.
Should we
And
change that, bring back, they must return the approved application to the city, or, yeah, copy?
It's, okay, so in discussion, it's, well, I'm not gonna get into it because it's a detail. I think this is what we want, and better minds than mine will, either find a way or whatever. Okay, let's vote on it. Commissioner Head,
Yes.
Commissioner Lovendahl,
Yes.
Commissioner Thielen is a yes. Carried, 5:12 p.m. Anything else on these forms?
I have another question.
Yes.
So the planning clearance application for, the 10MU is different than, so on the planning clearance application for the 10MU, there was the inclusion of a box that said single family dwelling, right? SFD. Is that synonymous with residential? I mean, are there other types of,
There's single family dwellings, there's duplexes, there's.
those are also considered residential? So what does residential mean here? Can you define that for me on the specific, on the form here for the commercial zone?
Well, it depends on what uses, what does it say?
It doesn't say residential, it says single family dwelling or duplex.
Wait, am I looking at the right? It says right on the front here, project description including all accessory uses and or structures, residential, commercial, partial zone.
What page are you on?
Page 72.
Minus 65.
Oh,
Oh, 65. Are there two?
oh,
I don't know,
Applications?
72.
That would be a checkbox, so, in this case, it would be checked for commercial.
This is for all the zones, it doesn't say
So this
personal.
is to check which Is this about the use of the structure or?
That would be residential would be where people live, commercial would be where a business.
So this is also the planning clearance application for residential zones for R1, R2?
This page of it is on other,
Okay,
applications for other zones.
so the 10MU is separate altogether.
I believe the 10MU would be what is constituted by the partial zone.
Oh, okay.
I might be mistaken on that though. That,
Yeah, I was gonna ask,
Maybe-
what is partial zone?
yeah, that's what I thought it was.
No, I think this is something else.
Do you think it's something else?
I think this is maybe like a,
Like if it has two different zonings on one
Well-
property?
no, parcel zone. I think this, it's not a use like a residential use or a commercial use. This might be something like a petitioning, but I don't.
Okay.
I don't know.
So is it possible to have,
I could be wrong.
so it seems like this is about the zone that the structure is gonna be located in. Could it be zone colon and then residential, commercial? You know, I think we should call the zones by their names.
Right.
We have different zones, we have, you know, we have multiple commercial zones, right? There's the 4C and something else, there's the 10MU, there's 2 residentials. Why aren't we specifying?
Well, we do when we actually do the planning clearance. I don't know why we have this page. This is interesting. This is kind of a
This is an informational.
informational, like kind of a,
Where is the page that talks about which zone the structure?
The checklist for specific commercial zone, information starts on page 74.
74, 71, 73.
here, 74. This, let's take this.
That's the chart, yeah, I've got 67, okay. But,
Is that, so on your page 74, that where on the right column where it says complies, is that where a check would go or?
It would be a check or a yes, or, like you said, a note, about, you know, whether or not, there, are conditions that make it appropriate. Or, you know, in the case of it doesn't conform, then a no would go in one of those boxes.
Would you like circle, like single family dwelling?
Yep, usually, if we were looking at, you know, a single family dwelling in a commercial zone, I would say complies, yes, and then I would circle that. Or if it was a hospital going in, I would circle or highlight, you know, what the specific zone is. But when we get to things like the manufactured homes, it might be, you know, checking off each individual item to make sure that each of those items confirms, and then just on the box on the right, yes.
It complies with the use of that zone.
Mhm.
That's what you mean.
I would like to say that manufactured home thing at the bottom of page 74 is exactly the kind of thing that our code update would deal with, because this is not legal anymore. It doesn't fit state law.
Okay. So it's not clear what this first page is. This isn't the first page of the application on 72?
No, it's the first page of the application. And now that I've had a little time to look at it and think about it, I believe you were right, where if you were using it for a residential purpose, you would check residential, but if you were using it for a commercial purpose, you would check commercial, and if you were
Okay,
using
so
it.
this is related to
And I think
the,
that parcel zone just might be what is the zone.
oh,
Maybe,
Oh, right.
okay, that's
What
really
is the zone of the
unclear.
parcel, of the parcel?
It
okay,
seems like it should be more clear.
Would be C, would be 10 MU, would be.
Right.
yeah,
okay.
okay, I will update that.
Okay, yeah, thanks. Parcel number, okay. So I have another question. When a planning clearance application comes in, how do they demonstrate that they have water or sewer?
They need to have the head of public works sign off, that if they have city sewer and water, it would be through the head of public works. Because of the curtailment that we're in, we have to take alternative means for proof of water. So what we've been doing, at least all of you should be aware, would be a water well contract. The only time that that's been applicable, though, has been in public hearings thus far. So the planning commission has seen what we would need for proof of water.
Okay, so Public Works signs off because at some point they paid for a water hookup, and Public Works keeps track of that.
The city office keeps track of that. The public works guys will be able to verify whether or not it's possible to do the hookup.
Okay. The water could be paid, but it couldn't be not possible?
More like if the sewer main is close enough, they could verify whether they could actually do a sewer hookup, or if they would have to go septic. But
Do we allow septic in the city?
I don't think under normal circumstances, I think there are a few that have been grandfathered in, and it might depend on the location. Or there might be some that were approved through variances. No? No, okay.
Well, not planning commission.
Okay.
If somebody else.
I didn't think they were, but I don't know. I'd love to know the answer to that. I'll probably have to look it up.
There's probably grandfathered in, so.
There are septic systems, down on, Garrison Lake Road, it's
Mhm.
not in the city. But there's old septic systems that were up on Coast Guard that are not used anymore. I have a question about.
Yes, Commissioner Lovendahl, go ahead.
There was a form, and I as I recall, said it was either well or city water. Those were two options. And now we just identify how water is made available to the property. So what's to prevent people, we're not allowing water. I don't know why we have to. But anyway, water available to the property. What is to prevent people from just saying, I'm going to, with this form, I just want to put it in the well, because it's less expensive than getting it. And we have wells all over town. We haven't really addressed that situation. I'm just concerned as a planning situation.
As far as I'm aware, city would have to approve the well and county would have to approve the well. I don't know how to answer it other than that, because there are people.
I'm wondering if we want to have identification how water is made. It sounds like it's being left up to the person that is putting in for the building permit. Are we going to change this as soon as the moratorium's lifted?
I would probably update it once the moratorium's lifted, because that's a major planning obstacle right now.
Yeah, it just seems like right now we've got a lot of building going on in the city, and you have a lot of wells, must have a lot of wells going in. So I just don't want this to become an avenue that people can avoid hooking up to city resources, infrastructure.
Anything else? I'm still just seeing if we have anything else to say.
Well, I just want to thank Crystal for the planning training. It was really helpful.
Oh, we're still
We're still talking about.
we still have, we have more
We're
business
still
to do.
on,
I'd like to, if we're done with this, I'd like to move on.
Yeah. I thought you were about to end the meeting.
No, we have, planning commission comment. I'd like to elect the planning commission secretary. We don't have a secretary, and supposedly the secretary signs plats according to our, ordinances. So, I believe Joseph is the city person who's, the person to do.
What kind of plat?
The secretary signs plats and other official documents of the planning commission. Mr. Huddle didn't know that either.
Well, but we don't, well, our code says who signs the plats.
Can you repeat that, Crystal?
Under each plat. That
Okay.
type of plat, whether it's that's why I was asking.
Oh,
Because whether it's a subdivision plat, a minor petition plat, or a major petition plat, it says who signed.
Okay.
The city code says that?
But Joseph is the de
Regardless.
facto secretary, as was Pat.
Okay. Are you saying we don't need to elect him?
Well, we probably should, I don't know.
I would like to have
Yeah.
a secretary on record.
So
Just because I'm the chair and I'm kind of an official kind of a guy.
secretary responsible for taking minutes and,
The secretary
Mhm.
shall sign plats and other official documents of the planning commission and see the recommendations of the planning commission are forwarded to the city council. The secretary shall ensure the minutes of the planning commission meetings are recorded pursuant to Oregon ORS 192-650. That's the one I was talking about.
See, this is all stuff he does, and Patty did it before.
He does it, they do it, we elected Patty
yeah,
every,
We should elect.
so we should elect him.
does Joseph want the job?
I will happily do whatever I can to help the city and its commissions.
Do we have a nomination? Commissioner Lovendall.
I will nominate Joseph Harrison as the secretary for the planning committee.
Second,
It's been moved and seconded, discussion? I think it's a great idea. Commissioner Head,
yes.
Commissioner Lovendall,
Yes.
Commissioner Thielen's a yes. Thank you.
Thank you. I am honored to be given the position.
I think it's especially good also because you always have to have somebody on the stuff when you do grants and stuff with the LCD. And I feel like Joseph is the best one because he's in the office the most. And so if anything comes, you want it quickly dealt with. You know, like if you get something and it says, well, you guys didn't do this,
Agreed, yeah.
then there's somebody there answering it saying, well, I'll get somebody on this. And and he's really good at that.
Thank you. Thank you, Joseph.
Thanks, Joseph.
Thank you.
City planner, are there comments? No? I have a comment, so we're gonna have planning commission comments. I have a comment. I would like to, so I believe our next meeting is the first, and I cannot be here on the first. I was wondering if people would be willing to move it to the next Tuesday. Which would be the 8th. And if, I'm sure that Commissioner Burnt would be happy to run the meeting, but I cannot be here.
That's all I say.
So,
I don't have a problem with the 8th, or the 1st.
okay, so let's, can we meet on the 8th? I'd like to meet on the 8th.
Okay.
Okay, if you would put that in our minutes, if that's what we're gonna do. Thank you. It'll be the 8th. I appreciate you guys doing that. Planning commission comments.
Okay, now is where I thank Crystal for the presentation. Thank you for the training, that was very helpful.
Thank you, Crystal. And for all you do for us. And you too, Jim.
And Joseph, yeah, thanks for putting this, these things in the packet. Appreciate it.
Thank you for volunteering your time to help the city by being a member of one of our commissions. We need more citizens volunteering for commissions and committees.
Yeah, well,
Agreed.
Esther, I'd like to thank the other commissioners for delving into these subjects deeply and bringing up motions and opinions. I think it's awesome.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
I actually would also like to thank Commissioner Head for giving me directive on the minutes. Getting feedback helps me grow as a person. So if there are things I can do to, be better at my job, please tell me.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, it's just that after like a busy month of working and writing papers, I come to the minutes as a reminder to bring myself back to the previous meeting.
Yeah.
And, all the things that transpired and the discussions, and the more detail that's there, the easier it is. I mean, the better our record is,
Yeah, the better our record is, because it is our history.
Okay, so that's basically it. The meeting is adjourned, 5:28.
Awesome, Greg. Yeah, thanks, Rob.
Thank you, you guys.
Mhm.